Hi, I'm Lauren McCracken, and you're watching Cracken's Corner. This is episode 13, Art and Trauma Recovery Part 2, Project Cope. So this is kind of a unique episode, a little different from my normal format, but not too far off, so hopefully you'll enjoy it. And I'm going to talk about some pretty heavy subjects, so if that's not your thing, I totally understand, and I will see you next week. But if you're down, I'm ready to share some pretty personal stuff, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. So my quote for this week is about using art as a way to cope. I should advise you to put it all down as beautifully and as carefully as you can in some beautifully bound book. It will seem as if you were making the visions banal, but then you need to do that. Then you are freed from the power of them. Then when these things are in some precious book, you can go back to the book and turn over the pages, and for you it will be your church, your cathedral, the silent places of your spirit, where you will find renewal. If anyone tells you that it is morbid or neurotic, and you listen to them, then you will lose your soul, for in that book is your soul. And that's a quote by C.G. Jung. Carl Jung was a very, very prominent psychologist. He magnificently describes the importance of utilizing a creative medium to process and heal from trauma. He speaks to how you can harness the intensity of these emotions, as difficult as they are to negotiate, and transform them into something powerful and beautiful. Art has this kind of transcendent quality to it, especially if you're using it as a vehicle for emotional recovery. So I thought that was a really good quote to go into talking about this. So just kind of a quick introduction to this idea. The idea of creating physical art as a way to deal with complex emotions is really nothing new to me. It's something I've done easily since my college days, and back in my high school years, painting a picture to express my grief over losing a beloved friendship, or building a ceramic ship and scoring the things that I wanted to say to my ex as a way to deal with like a really bad breakup was something that I got a lot out of. These things were helpful, and they allowed me a physical way to express the depths of my emotions in a way that was healthy and constructive. It's impossible to talk about this project without mentioning the circumstances that led up to it. As I've mentioned before, I was sexually abused and manipulated as a child and coerced into silence. I tried to ignore it and push every memory associated with that experience away from myself, but when I was in college and it seemed like everything was actually starting to go really well for me in my life, somehow these things started to kind of come back to the surface and haunt me. And I would have horrible nightmares about it, and I would be just like walking to class sometimes, and I'd break down and cry and collapse just with grief. And it was really hard, but around that time was when I decided that I needed to address these things in my life and banish these shadows from my everyday existence. So I made a choice to try and seek out trauma therapy. And this project was really greatly inspired by that whole process, which has been instrumental in helping me find a place of peace and healing. So what exactly is Project Cope? It was an idea that I came up with while I was in trauma therapy as a way to physically create something that could express what I believe to be the 5 stages of healing beyond what I had experienced. I set out to create 5 specific playlists for each painting that I was planning to create to evoke all of the range of emotion that I wanted to express with each piece. So it took me like several weeks just to come up with the playlists. It took me even more to make the physical pieces of art. But in the end, it was a really difficult but really cathartic process. And I think it gave me something to aspire to as I was in trauma therapy. And somehow I think it helped me to actually complete them, which was at the time of me creating them still a dream. And something that I'm extremely proud of, because it was the hardest thing that I ever ended up doing, going through all those 5 steps. I really use this as a way to benefit my own trauma therapy, though of course I wouldn't say you should replace any sort of professional trauma therapy with this. I think it's more of a supplement and something to do alongside of it. And if you are like a spiritual person or a religious person, then I would definitely recommend seeing a spiritual advisor at the same time, because they can also help you to go through this process. Your steps may look different than mine, and your process may be different than mine, and your goals may be different than mine, but ultimately I wanted to feel at peace with myself and with what had happened to me, to accept it and process it in a healthy way, and find a way to forgive myself and to heal from the pain that I was carrying around for way too long in my life. So I tried to pair each one of these pieces up with just one of the songs from the playlist that I had created. And obviously I can't play them, but I can speak a bit about some of my favorite lyrics from a few of these songs to try to explain them a little bit better. So the first piece is called Fear, and that was the first emotion that I felt. So whenever I think about fear, I think primarily about it being yellow and this kind of wild energy that's surrounding you and in a panic state. It's not a quiet color, it's a pretty loud color. So the words that I kind of associated with this particular piece were from the song Caught in the Middle by Nemesia. Brutal power, it keeps me locked, caught in the middle. Raging danger, and I have lost control. Dying, I'm craving, I'm still alone, caught in the middle. Killing passions, and I have nothing left. I want to know what it takes to find some peace of mind, there where I want to be. Yes, I know nothing comes for free. Just let me see what is right for me. So the core emotion and primary response to this abuse for me was fear and terror, which is not surprising. I stored it physically in my body, and I was easily startled and jumpy, and having issues with being vulnerable around other people. I became hyper aware of my position in public spaces and of potential security threats, especially males that were larger and stronger than me. I became extremely aware of who they were and where they were, and trying to figure out what their motives were. I felt like I couldn't trust anyone. I believed that if I was really careful, maybe I could prepare for threats. I became extremely risk-averse, avoiding anything that reminded me of these things surrounding the circumstances of the abuse. Anxiety for me reached clinical levels around the same time that I started to realize what had happened to me and process it as a young teenager. And I told my parents about it at that time, and that was when I started to get help for OCD and depression professionally, and I'm really glad that I did. But that was kind of like the opening of that box for me. So for my next piece, this one was the stage called Despair, and I focused primarily on the blues with like little accents of gray in there. So the song that I associated with this phase was To Forgive by the Smashing Pumpkins. I sensed my loss before I even learned to talk, and I remember my birthdays. Empty party afternoons won't come back. Holding back the fool again. Holding back the fool pretends. I forget to forget. nothing is important. Holding back the fool again. I forget to forget me. I forget to forget, you see, nothing is important to me. So reaching into despair was primarily a feeling of helplessness and being unable to protect myself or anyone else from harm. I was really mourning the loss of my naive and trusting confidence, the loss of my innocence, not wanting to go anywhere or see anyone. Despair was me disengaging with the world and with life in general, believing that there was no way out of this darkness that had enveloped my mind, and having this strong sense that I've read is actually a very common recurring thought throughout the minds of people who have experienced significant trauma in their lives, of feeling like their life is going to be cut short sooner than the average person, like feeling like you may pass earlier or younger or suddenly, is apparently a very common experience, and it's something that I dealt with for sure, and every once in a while it still pops up in my head. During this phase, I really was worrying about the future, and I was convinced that no one could ever really love me or see any value in me after what I had come to see myself as. I allowed this person to make me believe that I was worthless and stupid and just a thing to be used and discarded when I wasn't interesting anymore. It made me feel really insecure and like my life didn't really have any meaning. So the next stage that I went through, and this one's pretty obvious with the color arrangement, was rage. It's red primarily, but there's this white hot like anger around it that almost felt like a shield to protect me from the vulnerable emotions that I was feeling earlier with fear and despair. Rage and anger in general is probably the emotion that I struggle with the most because I feel the most uncomfortable having it and dealing with it and experiencing it. It's something that I feel ill-prepared to actually confront, but it's something I'm working on actively in my life, just in general, to realize that even that has a purpose, and anger is trying to tell you something. It's there for a reason. So the song that kind of hit me for that feeling of rage, and I would say it's kind of rage and disgust combined, because they sort of go together when it comes to this sort of an emotion, was the song Getting Scared by Imogen Heap. The only times in my life the sun was meant to shine for me, you made it pour down in tears of rain, and dug my pride with a knife, encaged by your obsession with me, time for some mental torture and screams of justified pain. So you're gonna chase me now, boy? Yeah, you're gonna corner me now, boy? You think you're going to threaten me now, boy? Well, somehow I don't think so. And after surviving this sexual trauma as a naive child, when you come to realize how your trust has been violated and the ways you were manipulated, you come to feel so disgusted and enraged, as I did. It's a very common experience. I felt like my power and my agency were taken away from me, and the authority I had over my own body was gone. I felt damaged, and like there was something gross or wrong with me, and I struggled to want to take care of myself, which is something that a lot of survivors of sexual trauma report. Sometimes I'd see things that would remind me of what happened, and I'd get so irrationally angry just because it set off a memory, and it had nothing to do with whatever the stimulus was. It was just connected to those memories, and that's really what was driving it. I was so angry at myself for what I would say was letting it happen, but really I didn't let it happen. I was a child, and I would never hold a child accountable for not speaking up or saying something when they're in a horrible position like that. So a big lesson for me through therapy was learning to view myself through that lens, because when this was all happening, I was a little girl, and I was threatened by someone who was a lot more powerful than me, who was a lot more physically powerful. And it wouldn't have been an easy thing for me by any means to, even if I was emboldened to believe that like everyone would believe me if I told them what was going on, to try to physically fight this person off would have been very, very hard. And especially when you've been threatened by them and you've seen them be physically violent against other people and threaten your loved ones, then you probably would also have a hard time speaking up for yourself. So it was a really difficult situation. I used to get really horrible nightmares about being really aggressive, and intrusive thoughts about being aggressive, which kind of goes along with OCD, because it's an unwanted thought. It's not something I like to think about. It's not something I would choose to think about. It would almost kind of flash into my brain, and I would try to shut it out, because it's like your mind is trying to find a way to deal with all this anger you have. And it kind of made me obsessed with this concept of revenge, but it was more of the idea of it than anything else, because you feel like you deserve justice, and you know that what happened to you was so wrong, it enrages your soul, because that anger is serving to protect you and to tell you that you need to do something, you need to take action. Because of all this, I think this is why I became really obsessed with like the whole idea of justice, and why I love seeing people who have been wronged find their way to happiness and crawl their way out of like the absolute depths of despair and trauma. It's why I love superheroes so much, and the idea of being a superhero, because there was someone out there fighting for the people who were being harmed and getting screwed over and treated badly. And it was kind of a template for me for what I was looking for in my life as a child, but then as an adult, what I wanted to become. I found that through a lot of soul searching, as frustrating as it is, there really was nothing that I could ever do that could put my abuser through the same amount of pain that he had put me through. And I know that violence would only beget more violence, so that obviously could never be the answer. And it wouldn't satisfy me to hurt another person. Ultimately, I would still feel just as much pain, and it would just end up inadvertently hurting innocent people who cared about this person. So I never really wanted to go down that route. Though I can understand why some people do, or why they have those thoughts, because the things that can happen to a person are horrible, and no one deserves to be treated that way. It's funny because in the first 3 cycles, between fear and despair and rage, I'd constantly find myself cycling between them, going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, back and forth between these 3 primary emotions and stages. But I knew that I was stuck in a pattern with those, and that wasn't really getting me anywhere. It wasn't serving me any longer. So I was looking for a way out. And for me, that naturally came through a more spiritual direction, which I entitled Reflection, which is step number 4. So this one is kind of different. I had green as the primary color because I felt like this was a growth mindset kind of a thing. This is something you have to grow through. And this idea of taking time and trying to release all of these feelings that I had within myself and find a new way to cope with them and to find a way to rise above them, because I felt like they were just tying me down. So I had the little flames or whatever they are emanating off my body in like a physical way. So for reflection, it's probably one of the most complicated steps that I think are possible for this process. I picked 2 different songs because of that. The first was from Ten of Swords by Echoes of Eternity, an amazing band that most people don't really know about. And the lyrics are, "I'm just going through the motions, but not living. I must take back what is mine and fight my demons. I embrace my darker side, knowing that it's part of life. Even with my war inside, I will rise again. This pain I hold lives in my soul, yet I must learn to let it go. I must go on, I must be strong. It's always darkest right before the dawn." And this was really a point of acceptance of that heavy weight that I had been carrying around for most of my life. And it was starting to reach a point where I couldn't bear it anymore. And I knew I needed to change something. I needed to do something to pull myself out of that cycle. I always felt this kind of compulsive need to tell people about what had happened to me whenever I found someone that I wanted to be closer to, whether it was like a really good friend or potential romantic interest or whatever. I just felt like this need to disclose that about myself, because it felt like this dark secret that I was carrying around that had such a gigantic influence over my life. And I hoped that by disclosing that, they would better understand me and make me feel more safe and more secure, and help them understand why I was the way that I was. I knew that I had to find a way to get help and to process all this stuff. And ultimately, my goal was to find peace so that I wasn't constantly haunted by all the things that had happened and what I had experienced. So the second song I chose is a lot more spiritual in nature, even though it's interesting because I'm not sure if that was the original intention of the song. It was Break In by Hailstorm, who are actually from Philly. So I love being able to talk about other musicians from my city. So the lyrics go, "So break in and take everything I have till there is nothing left, till it's just your voice in my head. And when the lights come on, you see me as I am, you're still inside me. You are the only one that sees me, that trusts me and believes me. You are the only one that knows me. And in the dark you show me. Yeah, it's perfectly reckless. But damn, you leave me defenseless, so break in." And I remember singing this song when I was alone in adoration, which is a very Catholic concept. Basically, we have this idea that in a consecrated host, in the form of like a communion, that there is the presence of God. It's like a very direct thing, and it can be an extremely spiritual exercise for us to just take time in front of what we call the Blessed Sacrament. Usually it's like in a beautiful gold container that we call a monstrance, and you take that time in the direct presence of God with that idea in mind and pray and reflect and try to communicate with God in like sort of a special way. So I would sing songs when I was in there by myself, and I would sing that song a lot because that's what I was calling out for. I was calling out to God for strength to help me get through this, because I felt like I had this desire in my heart to find healing and to find mercy and forgiveness within myself for what had happened. I really wanted to forgive myself for everything that I'd experienced, because I think for some reason it's very hard to accept that you don't always do the things that you wish you did. If I could go back in time and things were different, I would have allowed myself to be in that situation. And without really meaning to, on some kind of a subconscious level, I held on to this resentment within my own heart of myself for allowing it to happen, like I said before. But once again, I would never blame a child for acting the way that they did. I did at the time what I thought was right. I thought I was protecting myself and my family, so I kept my mouth shut. And turning to a professional therapist who deals with trauma, and turning to a spiritual advisor, in a priest that I was really good friends with, that I knew I could trust and would understand my situation, helped me a lot to grow from this. And I actually took a page out of I believe it was a Buddhist handbook that I was reading, saying to try and imagine this person that has harmed you in a great way as a child, because it's very hard to stay mad at a child, because you understand that they're still so new to the world, and even if they do something wrong, a lot of the times they don't really understand the full impact of what they're doing. And it made it easier for me to help to forgive myself, but then later even I chose to at least try to forgive my abuser, which is something that nobody pushed me towards, weirdly enough. It was something I wanted to do for myself. I saw it as a way for me to reclaim my power over the situation, to say, not only am I going to heal from this and not allow my past to dictate my actions, but I'll hold you accountable for what you did, and I will tell you what you did, but I want you to know that I'm beyond it now, and I'm not afraid of you anymore, and I'm not going to live in fear anymore. So through a lot of introspection and therapy and meditation and praying the rosary, I was moving in that direction towards being able to do that, something I had only dreamt about and I didn't think I could ever do. It was the hardest thing I ever did, to be honest with you, but I'm really glad that I did it. And that may not be the answer for everyone. Some people, you may just need to come to love yourself and forgive yourself for whatever you had been through. That's totally good. No judgment. I think every situation is different. But for me, that's what I needed, and I did it. So the last step, which was kind of achieved shortly after getting through that period of reflection, was benevolence. And I think it's the most beautiful step. I think it's the hardest one to get to, and it's well earned. So I went with this purple color, because I always think of this idea of purple being this ultimate color, and a lot of new age people talk about the indigo aura, or indigo children being these super special spiritual people, but it's almost like enlightenment. The concept of benevolence is something that I wanted to extend all around, to myself, to the people around me. I wanted to become a light in the world to help other people and to help them find their ways out of the dark when they're in it, through whatever circumstance. The song that I thought of for this is one of my favorites, Back in the Picture by the Rasmus. There were times in my life I was down on my knees, now it's over. Deep inside my heart I know. Back in the picture, I wonder what took so long, because it really did take a long time for me to get there, but it was a goal of mine. It felt like a victory lap to be able to find that closure and that healing, I know that with the support of my community around me, with my family and my friends and everyone, my therapists, my spiritual advisors, people that gave me advice, I was able to conquer it and figure out that I am capable of mercy. And that's something that I wanted for so long, and I finally found it, and I felt so glad that I did. I think it's important to say that if you are someone who is choosing to forgive someone's actions, you certainly don't have to talk to that person if you don't want to, or if you feel it wouldn't be good for you. You can also forgive someone quietly and within your own heart, if that's something you want to do and you feel more comfortable with that. It also doesn't mean that whatever they did was okay. It doesn't excuse any kind of behavior. For me, at least, forgiveness meant acknowledging what had happened, but seeking to use it as something to learn from and to grow from, and say, that's in the past now, and I'm going to bury it, and I'm going to leave it here. And I'm not going to let it destroy me anymore. That's what I tried to do with it, and that's where I think I'm heading with it. And I'm happy to say that it doesn't haunt me anymore after going through this process, which took a long time, not just physically making Project Cope, but experiencing Project Cope. I don't get scared or jumpy anymore if someone gets too close to me. Or if someone tries to touch me, it doesn't affect me the same way. I have, and now I keep, healthy boundaries about my body, about who and when and where I feel comfortable with somebody interacting with me physically. And I reinforce those, which is something I had to learn for myself, but it's extremely important. I now feel an obligation to actually protect myself by whatever means necessary if anyone should ever attempt to harm me ever again. And I wouldn't hesitate to take an action because I know how much damage that can do to someone at any age. I can travel anywhere now without getting horrible flashbacks or painful memories about things that had happened in the past. I'm not paralyzed, and I am not helpless anymore. I am a more complete version of who I was always meant to be. And I think I've gained a lot of insight into the process of healing from trauma, and I have tried to help other people deal with theirs. And it may not be from a situation like mine, it could have been from anything. But I like to think now that I've lived through this, I have a blueprint that might be helpful for some other people. And some people have told me it has. They haven't implemented it exactly the way that I have, but it's been really beneficial to their life, and that's all that I really care about. I want to help people heal. So just as a little wrap up, if you are going through this experience, I would absolutely recommend adopting my idea as just like a concept and something to use along with professional therapy to help you express yourself, or as Jung put it, to put all of your art into this book and turn it into your own personal cathedral. Now I have these paintings that I can proudly hang on a wall and realize exactly how far I've come. And remember that no matter what else, whatever may happen to me for the rest of my life now, I kind of know how to get out of it when things are really bad, when life is extremely difficult and you feel like you can't go on anymore because of something horrible that has happened. I know that there is hope and that you can find a way out. And to anyone who is going through this right now, I want you to know I'm here for you. I'm absolutely praying for you, even if I don't know you personally, because I understand, at least to some degree, the pain. And I want you to find your way out and to know that there is a way out of this, that you can find peace. You will not have to feel this way forever. If you want to do this kind of work, going through trauma therapy, it can be really good for you, and your life can and will get better from here. So yeah, thank you so much once again for coming and joining me today in my podcast. I know that I'm trying to grind away at this, and sometimes it's hard stuff to talk about. Like, this isn't an easy topic for me to talk about, but I think it's extremely important. And hopefully it'll help somebody out there who's dealing with this right now to find their own way out. And you can do it in whatever way feels right for you. I made paintings and playlists. Maybe you'll do drawings or write poetry or make a dance or write a novel, who knows. But the option is out there for you, and you can change it however you'd like. Just the whole idea is finding an end goal that you're happy with, that leads you to a state of peace and joy, and finding love within your heart for yourself that you can kind of just shine out to the rest of the world. So yeah, thank you for coming along with me on this ride. If you have any questions, if you'd like to share something with me, if you'd like me to try to help you with any problems that you're experiencing in your life and maybe want me to talk about on the show, please feel free to message me at CrackensCornerPodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on our video. If it's something you feel comfortable sharing publicly, that's totally fine. If you want to be anonymous or you just want my advice on something privately, that's totally okay too. I'm happy to give that as well. But yeah, thank you for joining me this week. I hope it's a wonderful week ahead for you. I'm going to try to make something good for next week. And I hope that things are beautiful in your life right now, or at least you're heading in a direction towards making it that way. I love you. Have a great day. Bye. As an adult, what I wanted to become. Hi, dear. That's Zuko making his own appearance. Hi, sweetie. Yes, you're my boy. Are you the cutest? Indeed, you are. I love you. Yes. He's a little upset that we're interfering with his designated cuddle time right now to record, but we'll be done soon, buddy. Don't worry. I know. You are the most handsome boy.